In the last few minutes, a judge who's leading an inquiry into the role of undercover policing has said he will examine what the justification is for this type of policing. Lord Justice Pitchford is looking into the Special Demonstration Squad, which worked to secretly infiltrate pressure groups for 40 years. It's now been disbanded. Some undercover officers had sexual relationships and children with campaigners. One officer used the name of a dead baby to create a false identity. Back in 2012, I spoke to Mark Kennedy, an undercover police officer who pretended to be an environmental campaigner called Mark Stone. He had a relationship with a member of the protest group he'd infiltrated.
It was a very difficult time. This was a person that I shared everything with. We had an amazing friendship, a very loving and caring relationship. We spent a lot of time together, and we spent a lot of time together in some very difficult situations, some very intense situations, both in the UK and abroad. But equally, I had a lot of very good friends as well. There were a lot of people in the activist movement who are really genuine, very nice people who are only doing the things that they're doing because they really believe they have to do those things to bring about a change. Although I never erred or strayed from passing the information and the intelligence that I was gathering, which included intelligence against people that were very close friends of Mark Stone. It did become very difficult, and it did become a personal issue in my own head.
Well, how did you reconcile passing information about somebody that you were in love with and other fellow activists?
To be fair, the person I was in love with wasn't really involved with situations where I needed to pass intelligence about her. In fact, I never did do that. Certainly there were people...
But if you'd needed to, would you have done it? Would your loyalty have been to the police or to her?
In those circumstances, I don't think I would have done, and I think...
So therefore it was unprofessional?
Yes, you could say that, but I think I was in a position where, she was a person that was very independent, and still is, I'm sure, and she's a person who would make up her own mind and decisions about what she wanted to do, and I totally respected that. If she went on something and she was arrested for it, that's very much her way of doing things, and if that's what she wanted to do, then but she has to stand by that, and I'm sure she would, as do many other people.
But some campaigners said that by having this relationship, by sleeping with this woman, they described it as state-sanctioned abuse, because this woman could not give her informed consent to sleeping with you because she didn't know who you really were.
Well, that's certainly something which is being addressed by 8 women who claim to have had relationships with undercover police officers.
But how do you feel about being accused of state-sanctioned abuse?
I know that the relationship that we had outside of what names were was probably one of the most loving experiences I've ever had.
But you were lying to her.
I was lying to her about my name and who I was, yes. And it's very hard to know that that's really hurt her, and she's terribly upset about that. And it's something which I'm still finding very hard to deal with, and will for a long time to come. All I do know is that what we shared and how we shared our lives for 4.5, 5 years was an amazing time in the sense that we both supported each other through some very difficult times in our personal lives. It's just very sad that the way and how we fell in love happened to be under these circumstances.
Mark Kennedy talking to me back in 2012. Let's talk to our correspondent Dominic Casciani, who's at the High Court in London. Dominic, tell us more of what the judge has said and the sort of the terms, really, of this public inquiry.
Yeah, morning, Victoria. He said an awful lot this morning. In fact, Lord Justice Pitchford is still talking behind me in Court 76. In the room there's plenty of journalists, but also some of the people who expect to be right at the heart of this inquiry, including protesters. Neville Lawrence is there in court. There are plenty of lawyers who have been involved in the legal battles so far on this. What Lord Justice Pitchford has been doing this morning is effectively setting out his direction of travel. Now, he's made it abundantly clear that this is going to be absolutely massive. I mean, we're talking 3 years. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes on longer than that, because he says he's going to have to look at 50 years of human experience, to use his quote, human experience of undercover policing in England and Wales. Undercover operations which may have gone on in every one of the 43 forces across England and Wales. And critically, he's going to have to gather evidence, try and work out where the allegations of discreditable conduct, as he puts it, where those allegations lie, and test those. Now, some of the key headlines that have come out this morning is he said there is going to be a presumption that people will give evidence in public. And I think this is a really important moment for some of the protesters. They want evidence to be heard in public. Some of them want undercover officers to effectively be unmasked. Now, there is a caveat on that, because the judge has powers to order anonymity or even the inquiry to go behind closed doors where there is a public interest in doing so. So I think we're going to have a lot of battles in the year or so to come on that particular point. Another point he has made is he wants to establish as quickly as possible who are the core participants in this inquiry. So in essence, he wants to find out as many of the allegations as possible which are out there, hear first-hand testimony from these people on paper or through their lawyers, and then work out how he's going to manage it. Now, this again is a very, very big and complicated question for the inquiry, because one of the things that some of the protesters say is, if the undercover operations remain effectively secret, and we don't know who the undercover officers were, such as those infiltrating justice groups, how can court participants then come forward, because they won't necessarily know they were being targeted? So this is a really, really thorny issue.
Okay. Let me bring in Peter Francis, who was an undercover officer with the now disbanded Special Demonstration Squad, and for the last few years has been effectively whistleblowing on the tactics used by those officers. How critical is it to you, Peter Francis, that everybody is open and named and public in this inquiry?
I think it's going to be very, very important. Basically, it's a bit like Dominic just said in the report. How on earth, as an activist, do you know you were actually spied upon? We were very, very good in the work that we did. We operated from 1968 to 2008 with almost nobody outside the police or even the special branch actually knowing about us. So yeah, if you think about political campaigning, all political campaigning, CND, anti-war, anything you can think of since 1968 onwards, you potentially may have been next to a police spy. You may have had a relationship with a police spy. You may even have children with a police spy. So yeah, no, it's critical. I think if we use the police, what they say themselves, they always say we preserve our officers against terrorism and serious crime. Well, maybe use that as the base. Say if these officers were involved against serious criminals, terrorists, then yes, we will hide them.
Because the Metropolitan Police have always given this line: we neither confirm nor deny whether our officers were working undercover in such and such a place or at such and such a period of time. When you look back on the kind of tactics you employed, how do you reflect now?
I wish I wouldn't have done it.
What kind of things did you do?
All of the things that have been stated already in the media. I had the identity of a dead child. I did have 2 relationships, very brief relationship when I was out there. What I've already said about the spying that I did against the Lawrence family, the campaign, is already well known. There is no aspect that I don't regret having done it, with the exception of I'm now a very good whistleblower because of the work I did, so I wouldn't be able to whistleblow. I suppose that's about the only thing I can actually say to myself to give myself some credit. But no, the levels that we went against is the same tactics that you use against serious criminals and terrorists. Maybe the public would justify that, but can this really be justified against basically vast majority law-abiding political activists?
Why did you and colleagues think it was justified then?
In the special branch, you were elite part of the police force where you felt that you were doing something extra special on behalf of the state, dealing what the state described as being subversives. So people who were in political activities trying to cause change in whatever area, you felt you were part of the state at that given moment in time, and it was almost your duty, almost your privilege to actually almost to stop change.
Okay. Thank you very much for talking to us,
Pleasure.
Peter Francis, and thank you too to Dominic Casciani, who is at the High Court, and much more from Dominic throughout the day here on BBC News. Thank you very much for all your emails and comments this morning, particularly on the House of Lords. Ed on Twitter says the House of Lords is an essential block on the authority of the Commons. Without it, there would be effectively an elected dictatorship. Dan has emailed to say before people talk about abolition or reform of the Lords, they should educate themselves on it.